Welcome back to our discussions of MySQL. So last time we saw the successful running of this script, MySQL sample database, which creates the classic models database here. Now here it's, I just want to talk about this aspect of MySQL. If you highlight this and say set as default schema, then it becomes bold. So I'll set Adventure Work Save as the default schema, then it's bold here. When it wakes up, when you first run MySQL, none of these will be selected. So if you want to use this, you set as default schema. So if that means if your script doesn't say use classic models, then the default schema will be the fallback. Otherwise, if you don't have either one, that is, you don't have a use statement and you haven't set the default schema over here in the user interface by right-clicking and setting as default schema, then MySQL is going to say, what are you talking about? Because it doesn't have the full name of customers. Like create table customers, the full name of that is really classic models dot customers. And so the use allows us to dial in the first name. It's already there. So when customers comes up, it will be happy with us. Also, same thing. If you do set default schema, that's another way of telling MySQL which database tables to look at first. So the next thing I wanted to show is the unhappy case. You have a so let's create a syntax error here in our workbench, and it'll notice it here. By the way, these are not always reliable. By the way, in MySQL Workbench, these syntax errors sometimes they linger after you fix it. So be careful of that. I'll save this. I'm going to go ahead and run this script now, so we'll see the effect of the error here and how it's reported to us. Now, in order to see that, this is the successful run of the script last time, and every time I run a script, it's going to just add to this action output. So for the entire session that I have, it'll add to that list more and more. It gets harder to read. So I'm going to right-click here and do clear, and that'll clear my output window. So when I run this, I'll have just the output for this one run. I'll run this, and we know we're going to run into a syntax error that I created, and here it is. So earlier I said that scripts halt as soon as they encounter an error. So this script has successfully run up to this point, but the 10th command here, that is the 10th semicolon, failed. I left out the opening open parentheses here. Now we have an error here. I want you to notice the error code here. So if you give an error code, it's the last thing that's going to be reported on this list because the script bails at this point. There's an error, right? Most of the error codes you're going to see are not as nice as what the Java compiler produces. Error code 1064. You have an error in your SQL syntax. Check the manual. That's as useful as the syntax error message gets. You have a syntax error, look at the manual and fix it. So then I'd go around here and let's see if what this error message says here. If the workbench itself is my mouse cursor is bouncing around. There we go. I actually think the screen recording software that I'm using causes that. So we're not getting any information right now from that error here in MySQL Workbench. I would be surprised if it had anything more useful than this. So you be very careful with your SQL syntax. Work one piece at a time, because otherwise you might have a mound of SQL errors that are not easy to fix because the syntax errors are pretty general. Namely, you have a syntax error, fix it. So now that I fixed that error, I'm going to clear this again and run it again, and we'll see our successful creation. Okay, so now we have this database and it's created. I'm going to hit refresh here just in case. So I'm going to run actually one more command here. I'm going to expand this tables out here, and you can see the tables that this script creates: customers, employees, offices, order details, etc. We saw this earlier in the enterprise relationship diagram, also generated with the MySQL Workbench, and I'll take a look at that next in the next discussion. For now, I want to right-click on the customers database that we see before us here, defined. Again, this is column definitions here that are occurring here, the name of the column plus their data type. I right-click here and we'll select rows. Now there's a limit to 500 here, so if I have more than 500 rows, we won't see them. You can remove that limit, but we'll execute this command. Notice the command is the full name of it. We see the result here. So if we had more than one, let's duplicate this command here a couple of times. And then notice, by the way, here's the full name of the database table, the database schema name or the database name, and then dot the database table name. That's the full way of referring to the name, so you don't have it have a use statement or a default schema in those cases. So that's why we automatically generate it, no doubt. So now I have two select statements, and we'll get into the select statement a little bit right now. As soon as I execute this, let me clear my output window and run this. Now I have two statements in this script that get executed, and I wanted to show you the tab results here. So this is the customers 2, and this is the number of the window and the number of times it's been run. Again, this is heavily on tabbed interfaces, so not obvious in all cases where we have the script over here and the result here, the script over here and the results here. This output window is not tabbed, it seems global. Here are our two statements that we've executed here, and the results here from these select statements are in two tabs here. So select star from it, customers. That says select everything from this database. So we're seeing everything dumped out here. And we see our columns defined up here and the actual rows that contain the data here. And you can correlate that, the data that you see here, with the database table that came in through the insert statement here. Atelier graphique. Let's take a look at that when we queried it. There it is. And here it is in the report format. So the script created the database on the database server. Now the script is no longer running. The database itself is responding. So this data has been successfully put into the database tables that the server is maintaining for fast access. So here we see our results here. From the select statement, select everything from this customers. Okay. We haven't started studying the select statement here. We're still focusing more on the things you can do in MySQL, but I wanted to show you a little bit about the select statement. That's our read statement. That's primarily 90% of our study. That's 90% of the complexity, believe it or not, is the read statement in the SQL language. Other statements are relatively easy once you master the select statement. That's the core of your study, especially as an application programmer. You're mostly reading data from a database. Mostly. You're not defining necessarily the tables all the time. Sometimes you're asked to do that, but you're going to be tasked primarily in your jobs with crafting select statements that return data in the way that you want and as efficiently as you need. Okay, we'll finish exploring MySql WorkBench in the next lecture. Thank you.